Um,
Stop it.
And also, yeah, like as Kiwat said, if anything feels too much for anyone, please just exit the Zoom, watch the rest of it at another time. Don't ever feel that you have to hang around, because it can be hard. Some people are sweet and others not so much. And it's all about maintaining a safe space. So you go.
I was just going to say also, just to let you all know that this session is recorded as well. So if there are some things
That's a
that
good
you
flag.
don't feel like sharing, or you don't want to be on the recording and would like to talk to Bree directly afterwards, I'll add her contact details into the chat for you to send anything that you want to bring up.
Yep.
So yeah,
that is such a good flag. Thanks, mate. So we'll be talking about supporting team mental health today, and really we're actually going to go through quite a bit of information here together. So I may breeze through a few slides, and that's in the interest of not overwhelming anyone. But the way that we've designed this PowerPoint for this session is tomorrow, Kiwat and I will actually email this out to you all. And the idea is that you have it on hand should a staff member, employee, or colleague present with a mental health challenge, or maybe just, they feel like they need a bit of nurturing, or if you're trying to develop some policy or framework for a mentally healthy organization. So bear with me, we'll breeze through a few things. Can't speak English as the year wraps up. And then in the middle, we'll have a bit of a Q&A if anyone does want to ask a question or share an experience, which is personally my favorite part. I think we all learn prominently through peer-to-peer lived experience when it comes to mental health.
absolutely.
Kiwat, can you see the screen here? Beauty.
Yep.
Alrighty, so I thought we'd kick off by just talking about what even is mental health. Mental health is very cool at the moment. It's a cool bit of a buzzword that's been thrown around since the pandemic, because it was the first thing really that was impacted. And the upshot of COVID-19, I've said this before, is that it's highlighting the importance of mental health. And as that happens in the community, it happens at a government level, and we get funding. And obviously it makes it easier. It makes it easier to talk about it. It reduces stigma, etc. and so forth. So what even is mental health? It's such an interestingly loaded question, because there's many schools of thought around what mental health is. Now, historically, the school of thought was sort of, if you're feeling good all the time and you're thriving all the time, you have good mental health, kind of that Tony Robbins vibe, like life is always good, you're always on a high. I'm just going to share with you my school of thought across about 6 or 7 years supporting people with mental health conditions, challenges, you name it, is that it exists on a spectrum like everything else in the world. So much like our physical health, much like how the universe operates, mental health exists on a spectrum. And the reason I like this sort of model that kind of gives us the color-coded charts is that when we think about COVID-19, we were really just sitting in that little yellow block, most of us. I mean, we were operating from a survival mode, many of us from sort of a crisis mode as well. So that real low mood every day, feeling exhausted, not sleeping, issues with diet. And the reason I wanted to highlight that is because we can be really bloody hard on ourselves, actually, when it comes to our mental health. So if we're not thriving, if we're not excelling, if we're not executing our goals, it's our fault, it's our problem. If you think back to primary school, we may have done, or high school, even Maslow's hierarchy of needs. During COVID, we were really just surviving. So, we were just, okay, I need to eat, sleep. There's not much else I can do. My agency isn't there. My autonomy is not there to move into kind of the thriving space. Most people I work with, even really, seemingly objectively successful people, or people who are, in high paying jobs. I've worked with people at all levels, execs, all the way down to people that are unemployed, you name it. You can have a CEO sitting in a room with you who's in crisis, who's operating every day from a space of burnout, struggling with thoughts of suicide. And then you could work with someone who's unemployed, who's thriving or excelling for whatever reason. Maybe their relationships are really good, or they've got a really supportive family. So sometimes too, I guess the perceptions or assumptions that we tie with poor mental health aren't always quite right. But I find most of us sit anywhere between surviving and excelling. And that's kind of the goal, is we're going to fluctuate day to day. Some days and weeks we'll experience a sense of balance, calm, optimism. We all know this, and other days we'll be anxious, stressed. If you think about the omnivore, Omicron, whatever the new variant is. You can see, I mean, I've stopped watching the news, so I'm feeling not too shabby at the moment, but there's a few people out and about when I got my coffee this morning that, again, that anticipatory anxiety is back, right? So these are all things on a day-to-day basis. The simplest explanation, I believe, is your feelings are your mental health are your feelings. So obviously, if we neglect our feelings for too long, or we neglect our mental health for too long, it can have adverse physical impacts as well. We know that high stress and anxiety increases our pain receptors, things like that. There's actually new data coming out as well around internalized anger, which is really interesting. So people that internalize a lot of anger aren't able to express anger over a long period of time. And there's new data coming out around cancer being linked to that as well. So as the sector grows and evolves, we're seeing more and more just new and interesting studies, I suppose. And it's really important that we're factoring those in as well. And again, the reason I always tie it back to physical health is we forget that it impacts our physical health, and it absolutely does. It does.
Definitely drains me sometimes. Sometimes I feel like I can't even get out of bed sometimes,
Right.
Everything just, I move slower, and everything just takes that little bit longer, and that little bit, it's like a little bit longer to react to something,
Yeah. So you viscerally feel it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm the same. Like sometimes, and I feel like many of us can relate to that feeling of just feeling off, like in the heart, maybe it's your stomach, and it can take a while to go, what's going on here, until you go, I've spent 8 days on my phone all day, every day, looking at the news.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, mate. It's unbelievable. And even me as a mental health practitioner, I'll fail to look at my own sleeping, diet, things like that are all interlinked. So why it matters, I mean, outside of the very obvious fact that businesses that care about good mental health and well-being attract and keep top talent because they're great places to work, probably the main thing is that you can improve the quality of life of your employees and their families, right? So I think we think to mental health at a business level, well, if my business isn't super mentally healthy, that's fine. I've just got to get the job done. Well, you multiply, I live in Northcote, so there's 20 pubs on the block. That's a community of people. So we want mentally healthy communities. We don't want to adversely impact the mental health of our communities. And we can forget that, we can forget that we're a part of a collective sometimes as well. Workplaces that are inclusive of people with mental health conditions can increase participation in the workforce and positively influence community attitudes. So it is super important. And, the bottom line in terms of your business and how it operates is that, of course, we know PricewaterhouseCoopers did a study, and Heads Up, which is an organization run by Beyond Blue that I highly recommend checking out after this. Reduced absenteeism, reduced risk of conflict, grievances, turnover, disability injury rates, psychological distress claims by Fair Work, and of course, performance and morale. But look, if that slew of different reasons and data wasn't enough, it was really interesting to see. I think this was a 2019 survey on the right here. So now Heads Up, which is operated by Beyond Blue, they surveyed 3,000 people across the country, and the importance was, by state. So Queensland was the lowest, 87% of the people surveyed thought that a mentally healthy workplace was important, but you can see that pretty much every other state's relatively high. 91% in New South Wales, 94% in Victoria. So they want mentally healthy workplaces, leadership that nurture conversations around mental health. Physical safety, of course, is up there as well. Like, we all want to be safe at work. We want to know we're going to go to work and leave alive, well and breathing. But what was really interesting was that when they said, so do you feel like these employers are keeping you physically safe? Well, the data is pretty good. It's sort of all sitting above 65, 70%. Do you feel that your employer is keeping you mentally safe, mentally well, and nurturing your mental health? It's still pretty low. So you can see Queensland with the lowest at 46%. So as a community, we kind of want to begin to bridge that gap. It's understandable that it's a challenging thing to do because the dialogue's still not out there. in society. There's still
Yeah,
stigma.
that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting because like yeah, a lot of people aren't talking about it, and yeah,
Hmm.
and I know plenty of people who just don't simply talk about it enough. So that's really interesting data.
Yeah. And do you still feel that now, as we move through the pandemic, or do you feel like there's been an
I think there's
improvement?
been a shift. Like I know that I feel that there's more awareness and people are more comfortable to talk about mental health, and it's especially during the pandemic, people realize like a lot of things. Like I know that for myself that you know when I stopped, in the pandemic, everything sort of followed me, like it caught up with me. Usually in life, you move forward and you're sort of like distracting yourself, like going out
Mm,
socializing, doing all this sort of these things. But when you're in the pandemic, you sort of stop, and then all you're doing is sitting there thinking to your own thoughts, and then you're sort of like you've been forced to sort of deal with it. So I think
yeah.
that kind of brings it up for a lot of people. Like it's been a mentally trying time,
Yeah.
So it's been interesting. So yeah, I definitely feel there's a shift, and yeah, especially in the workplace, at least here with Music Vic, it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's really we talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And Music Vic, being there's been quite an incredible, it, I think it's a leadership thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
The leadership at Music Vic really role model their own mental health and well-being. So,
absolutely.
if they're having a shit day, they call it, like, I'm
Yeah.
actually going to take a half day mental health day. And even that is pretty powerful when you get a CEO or an exec saying,
Mm,
hey, like, everyone check in on yourself. And if you need the time, take the time. It's quite
yeah.
profound. And from what I've seen, no one takes the piss out of that either. It's
No, and
genuinely.
it makes me feel comfortable to do it because I was struggling a couple of weeks back, and yeah, and I really needed to take a day. And in old positions that I've held in the past, speaking up about that, I know I could, but I was always a little bit anxious to do
Mm,
it, and it was that sort of mindset was why I never asked. So, but seeing leadership do it really gave me the strength to know that I could do it myself. So
yeah.
yeah, it comes down to that sort of, yeah, for the team, it's great to have that sort of leadership. Yeah.
Yeah. That role modeling sort of
Mm,
comforting. I find that too.
mm.
I find that too. So thanks, Kiwat. And I just want to reiterate that we're not going to just tell you what's wrong with everything we're doing as a community. I want to actually, give you some tangible tips, and they're all tips based on my experience of working with companies and certainly supporting people with mental health issues. But just to reiterate that what we go through is very feelings based. So how to have the conversations, starting to think about how you maybe integrate it into your policies. But I recommend, as always, checking out Fair Work and Work Safe, because it will differ slightly state by state as well. And I know most of us here are in Victoria, but just in case, make sure that you're also checking out Fair Work, because they'll have particular policies that you could potentially apply to your organization and the incident as well, or the incidents of conversations around mental health. So we're going to quickly go over disclosure of mental health conditions and some tips on what to do there. We'll have a look at workplace bullying, circumstantial depression, and crisis or suicidal ideation. Sexual harassment is actually for another workshop. I apologize, as that's a very big and broad conversation. So we're actually going to be dedicating workshops to that early next year. But it won't be in this one. So I apologize that it's still sitting there. That was me probably not enough coffees deep as I was doing this. Alrighty. If anyone came to the Managing Angry Punters webinar or the Rebuilding Social Skills webinar, you may have heard me wank on about a bloke called Carl Rogers, who was definitely my favorite psychotherapist. There's hundreds of psychotherapists out there now sharing different modalities. The reason I like Rogers is because his tips and tricks are very tangible, very easy. You don't need counseling training really to apply them. They're very straightforward. One of the things that he hones in on is this concept of unconditional positive regard. So it's very hard when people come to us, and I know when I was in management positions, I struggled with this as well. If someone comes to us and says, hey, my mental health's not where it's supposed to be, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling this and that, I need a week off work, whatever it may be, I'm struggling. It's hard. Sometimes we have our own worldviews, and it's hard not to judge or give advice, or sometimes you might even assume it's a lie, and there's context around these different situations. If you can, and it's really challenging, but try to assume what they're telling you is the truth. Try to refrain from judging and just try and hold space and listen. I can tell you from you know, the seat of a practitioner. It's very frustrating when we hear of people out there who are using the mental health card, I suppose, as opposed to the actual mental health issue. But it does happen. And I would almost argue if people are using mental health to get out of doing something, you know, or they're just, I've got anxiety, I can't come to work, and they're actually at the pub, there's probably something going on anyway. So I would almost argue that that's also a bit of a mental health concern, because, you know, that degree of lying's relatively concerning for a practitioner. However, the percentage of people that do it's quite low compared to the people that are doing it relatively honestly. So as hard as it is, try and hold that space. Ask if they need reasonable adjustments made at work to support them. I always recommend just asking the question initially. So, hey, is there anything I can do for you? Or how can I support you as a manager? How can we support you as a team? They may not need anything changed. They may be telling you because just in case, maybe they're going to have an episode down the line or something will come up and they don't want you to be concerned. They want you to have the context. So again, leading with the question. If they're really struggling, like what would that look like? You could say, oh, well, for other employees, we've talked about flexible working, or we've had a look at their role, or, you know, things like that. So always leading with how can we support you? Let them know Music Victoria's mental health service is available. I am, of course, here for your staff to support them. People have been really confused as to what the service is. And the easiest way of explaining it is it's a better version of EAP for your business, for you or a family member. So access to a counsellor, they can book in via my Calendly or email me. It's very confidential, self-referral. And they have access to me up until June 2022, and there's no caps on that. So again, mentioning to them, hey, Music Victoria's got this mental health therapist at the moment. Feel free to give her an email.
Kath has just asked, what is EAP?
Yes, okay. EAP is Employee Assistance Program, and usually bigger companies actually. So like when I worked at 000, they had one where the company pays for a service that provides them a counsellor that their staff can call. So usually the company will pay for it. In this instance, you know, you've got it for free as part of your membership with Music Victoria, but it's a very similar service. So that is such a good question. I always forget that not every organization would have ever got an EAP on board. They're not cheap as well.
I've just shared your contact details again in the chat for people.
Yeah, thanks, dude. If you can do that and actually just pop in the mental health resource website as well, that would be amazing. So we've got a website up now that has stacks of information in there too. You can also use me for a debrief. So if you have a staff member present with mental health challenges, feel free to flick me an email, call my phone that Kiwat's just dropped in, and we can have a debrief and I can help support you in supporting that person as well. Remembering you don't need to be an expert. It's okay to say, hey, you know, thank you so much for telling me. Have you considered talking to a free mental health service like Sane Australia? Talk to Bree at Music Vic. You know, I want to make sure you get support from a professional. It's okay to call that. You know, if someone came to you with type 2 diabetes, you're not expected to suddenly be a physician. So it's sort of the same thing applies. Mental health first aid courses are amazing. They're 2 days. You can allocate staff members to do it. And then you've sort of got a similar setup that you would for regular first aid, right? Have you done it?
I've done it. Yeah, I've done it.
Mad.
Yeah, it's great.
Kath's done it. Brilliant.
Yeah.
And that's so good. Like, have you ever had used the training yet, or did you find? Yeah.
Yes, I have used it a couple of times now, and it's interesting how you can kind of sort of switch your head into that mode. You kind of once you go through it and you identify sort of things, it's like, okay, cool. So this is where I've got to sort of like not be invasive or respect the person. You know, you can see that they're struggling through something. It's like, oh, have you thought about going to see a GP? You know, just offering sort of non-invasive suggestions that don't, you know, make someone feel like they're crazy or anything like that, you know. So it's really handy, and the book as well. Like I did the Mental Health First Aid Australia, and they gave me the book, and I reference the book sometimes when I need to sort of either understand my own mental health, and so it's great.
Awesome.
I recommend it.
Louise has done it too. So Kath and Louise both are giving it a thumbs up. So that's great. I did it myself, and I was like, this is practical. You know what I mean? Like it was just really tangible.
Yeah. And the book they have too, like they reference a lot of art in it. So people, so you can kind of, yeah, it's great. Yeah, 100%.
Oh, you properly read the book. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, I read it.
I was like, cool, and put it in my bookshelf. Also, just a quick plug as well for our services until June 2022. We're doing tailored workshops for any business. So whether you're a pub, you know, a label, it doesn't matter. We'll do tailored workshops. So if you flip me an email and say, oh, my team's not really connecting, or my team doesn't really know about mental health, or I want to know how to be trauma informed in the way I lead, whatever it may be, we can design a half day or a full day workshop. So I know it's all sounding a wee bit too good to be true, but this is a real service offering until June next year.
Yeah, take advantage.
Kiwat, I'm gonna get a breath of air here before we dive into this one, because it's a bit of a big one. Yeah. Workplace bullying, brother. Have you ever come up against this?
Yeah, I've been, you know, in many different scenarios. You know, I've had so many different jobs. You know, like I was in sales, you know, in events, and you know, as a musician as well. You know, and I've had many different forms of it. You know, and one in particular was, you know, I used to do a lot of bookings for a lot of venues, and I used to have to fight for payments with the owners of these venues, and for some reason, you know, I'd be working with these people for years, and my work would speak for itself. But all the time, I would always have to fight for it. And all the time, I'd always have to fight for payments and everything. And I know that they're making money, and I know that they're doing this. And it just really got me to the point where I eventually had to just leave all of that behind. And it wasn't because I wasn't enjoying the work. I loved the work. I loved helping out musicians. But that constant battle back and forth, fighting somebody that should just be, okay, cool, you'll lead by example. We were talking about that earlier, you know, that leadership, but that constant fighting eventually got me to the point where I just had to leave. You know, I had to sometimes make, like, the lessons I learned from that is now in these sort of positions where I'm at, where I feel supported, I make sure that I take time for my mental health, and I make sure that I take time to ensure that I'm good to go back into the workplace. But there were times when I was working multiple jobs, and I didn't have the time to fight for these sort of things. And it was just always constantly just coming back. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? You're not meeting this. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. And it was a form of bullying, because I thought I was doing a good job. There was never that positive reinforcement. It was always like, you're not doing enough. You're not doing enough. And it just constantly wore me down. And then when I moved into a position where I was supported, it was just a breath of fresh air. You know, and
what was the difference like for you? What felt different in the supportive environment, you know?
Oh, just the number one question, are you okay? Like, are you okay? Just that one question is like, are you doing all right? You know, just checking in straight up, how you doing? And then talked about work. You know, it was just none of that. It was all the differences between just all about business rather than all about you and the business.
Yeah, it's like, how do we integrate, you know, the humanistic, hey, I give a shit, and we need to get the shit done, make money. Like,
exactly. Yeah,
it's that sweet spot, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you feel supported, you will want to put in the extra effort,
right?
Rather than putting in the extra effort and not have it recognized. Acknowledgement of people's efforts just goes such a long way. You know, that is something that I found is the big difference, that acknowledgement of effort and work. And yeah, that was just a big thing for me personally.
Yeah, we're all just giant children, you know. We just want a little
just because you know they encourage that in school, like get a gold star, get a gold star, and then you finish school, and then it's like no more gold stars. Like, you know what I mean?
Never again.
Again.
Something I really appreciated you talking about with this situation you're in for a while was the repeated. The repeated, I don't care, do more, I don't care.
Yeah.
So according to, you know, the definition of bullying as per WorkSafe and Fair Work is repeated and unreasonable behavior that's directed towards an employee or a group of employees that creates a risk to health and safety. And again, if you sense this is happening, go to Fair Work first. But the main thing is that if you're noticing a change in behavior in a staff member, or in between a dynamic between a few staff members, because it's not always manager to staff, you know, it's I know that's the hardest one if you're an employee, but it's not always manager to team member. It quite often is also peer to peer. So you want to be looking for absenteeism. Yeah, just the vibe, the dynamic, maybe if it's a bit off. So the most effective way to stamp it out, we know this, is to act quickly. It's a hard one, isn't it? Because when we're in school, which is where bullying begins, it's our first taste of it. It's really difficult because you've got to teach kids resilience, because we all know that when the teacher comes in and intervenes, it's a pain in the ass, for everyone. It usually actually doesn't help the bullying. The difference as adults is that we're not stuck in school all day being forced to sit with people. And school's quite a weird environment when you think about it, isn't it?
Yeah.
So kids do have to learn a degree of resilience because they have to adapt and be strategic and agile. Now, as adults, we have autonomy and agency. So when we step into situations as leaders, we're actually saying, I'm looking into this. I'm taking this seriously. Now, whether or not there is the bullying claim is true, the main thing is that you're looking into it, and it's always handled confidentially. And that's, again, a big difference in the journey of a child. If you ask it, okay, we're going to keep this confidential, it doesn't happen. Kids talk and run around the playground, take the piss. But as adults in a working environment, in a professional setting, we sign a contract and we sign guidelines. So making sure that you're jumping on it, at least inquiring with both parties. And again, Fair Work has stacks on this. Heads Up by Beyond Blue has even more on the recommended step-by-steps that fall in line with the legislation. Keeping a record of all your interactions with staff is not only good in terms of, if there's any claims down the line, but just for you, it's kind of like, this is such a weird throw, but Adele's new album, there's the emotional song where her son's crying. Oh no, her son's talking to her, and it's all very emotional. It's track 2 or 3. And it's actually,
the light turned off in here.
It's actually phone recordings with her son before bed. And they said, why did you do that? And she said she was in therapy. They were going through a divorce. She was worried about her kid. So she was like, I wanted to record the conversation. So I felt like I wasn't being a shit mom, like I was saying the right things. It's kind of similar. If you want to jot down those emails, keep a folder and make sure that, you feel that you have peace of mind with the way you've been managing it as well. And again, please give me a ring or shoot me an email, because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to support you with challenging, because it's stressful. It's very stressful managing workplace bullying.
Yeah, especially if you don't know where to start. That's the hardest thing, is like, where do you start? And especially in those workplace sort of hierarchies, like you said, it's not always management, but if it's like, lateral sort of employee, it's that, you don't know where to start. So, if you can, give Bree a call. I know I talked to you, about some things, and it's a really good place to sort of help. And so
that's a Google review straight from the horse's mouth,
right there, straight from the source.
And I appreciate that you always share that, Kiwat does use the service. Obviously the Music Vic staff can use the service as well, and sometimes just having a third party that's completely, I have no bias. That's my job, is just to be a complete third party. And with bullying, it's so challenging because there are contextual, nuanced situations, and I remember getting sexually harassed by a sales director who was the son of the boss, so how do you navigate that? The boss might be a cool guy, but personal relationship there. So it is important that you feel that you're supported, and that as well as your staff, that you feel that you can debrief too. I'm trying to shoot through these, team, because I do want to get to Q&A and ground our stuff at the end. But another really common one, and this ties in to COVID-19, probably the most common that I see certainly, is circumstantial depression or anxiety, or circumstantial anything mental health. If someone has a situational depression, going to be pretty much the same symptoms as a diagnosed depression. And we know that life does this to us. COVID is a great example of an identifiable stressor. So it's cropped up. It's, if you even think people that thought they were getting home, like I had a friend who thought she was able to go back to Ireland. She's been waiting 2 years to see her family. Omicron's here, visa's a bit up in arms now. So again, she's falling into this bout of depression. It's not that she's doing anything wrong or that she's weak or whatever stigmas are out there. It's that COVID sucks and it's going to stress us out. It's going to cause anxiety for different cohorts of people. loss of a loved one, relationship breakdown. Maybe you've got a really shitty friend circle, these are all things that will affect our feelings, affect our mental health. That spectrum will shift again. So knowing too that your staff don't need any kind of diagnosis, but they may just need some time, or they may need their workload reduced. And if anyone, I'm sure everyone here has had a breakup or had their heart broken, you think about how much you grieve. You just can't, like Kiwat, so you can't get out of bed, can't eat. It's going to make it pretty hard to be at full capacity for your job. And now on the other end of the spectrum, I've supported a lot of people who have thrown themselves into work as a distraction. It's great for a while. Look, I've been been one of these people myself, but yeah, it's just the candle does eventually burn out. So again, just if your staff are going through something, letting them know you're there. How can I support you? Such an easy question to ask. Usually the answer is not too scary, providing they're not saying, oh, can I get paid a full wage to do a day's work a week for the rest of the year? Usually we can do something for our team, whether it's just check in with me once a week, or whether it's, let's look at a job share, let's give you a few days off, whatever it may be. There's so many options out there, and just starting the conversation with your employee as well. I think, Kiwat, we've talked about this before, how nice it is just to be asked. How can I support you? What can I do for you?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
All right, I'm going to have a break. We'll jump to, let me turn this off for a tick. We'll jump to Q&A. Does anyone have any questions for Kiwat and I before we get into the next nitty gritty?
Sorry, you don't have to be shy. It's okay.
Kath does.
Kath, yeah. Feel free to turn your mic on if you like.
Due to missing the start, I'm able to just ask what the first 10 minutes were, like just brief dot points or something.
Yeah, I don't reckon you missed much. I reckon that was us waffling on about MySpace and...
Yeah, we're just talking introductory stuff while we're waiting for people. We usually have about 5 minutes while we're waiting for people to come in. But yeah, we just did a brief acknowledgement, and as well as just letting people know that some of this stuff can be triggering for people. So if you feel like you'd want to reach out to Bree at a later date and not talk about some stuff here, as this session is also being recorded, Bree's contact details are in the chat, and I highly recommend that reach out to her and have a yarn, have a bit of a chat. And it's these sort of things are hard to talk about sometimes, and like we're saying, it's don't know where to begin, in your workplace. Like if you're having some troubles with something in the workplace, it's really good to kind of just have someone's like, okay, where do I start? Where's the best place to do it? Because sometimes you don't want to put your foot in it. I know I put my foot in it sometimes. So yeah, I really recommend booking in with Bree if you can. It's really simple. Yeah, too easy.
Thanks.
Cheers, Kath. I'll chuck it. You know what? I'll chuck this on YouTube as well, on the Music Vet YouTube.
Yep. And we'll also upload it to the website. And
that is an interesting thing you just said, mate, around putting your foot in it. I think that definitely for me, that's what stops me sometimes. When I've been in a management position, that's what stopped me, is like, shit, I don't want to open up this can of worms. I don't know how to shut it. What do I do if they're really distressed or but yeah, it's just it's worth the risk, I think, and more often than not, if someone's down or struggling, they're already aware of that dialogue in their head, and I mean, I guess occasionally there's been the odd time where a person will go, oh shit, I thought I was hiding it and I'm not. But I think providing that we're asking the question with that genuine positive regard. So yeah, like just checking in, it's ensuring that non-judgmental safe space, but certainly going back to that notion of you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to know exactly what to say when you check in with someone.
And also I don't know, like sometimes I've been in positions where I've had to leave because it wasn't good for my mental health. And I don't know if anyone else has been through this, but have you ever been into a position in a job where you're like, I love it, but I just can't because of this thing here? And if you had someone to talk to within, a work environment, that could shift. how you move forward with the sort of where you are within the position. You know, if you have to leave because it's not good for your mental health, but if you have someone that you can talk to, that's where these sort of sessions come in great, because you can probably fix a problem before it is a problem, you know what I mean? And develop those skills that you can then take and transfer onto another position.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something that I really value, you know, because yeah, there are some positions that I've always loved, but I've had to leave because I'm like, it's not good for my mental health.
Yeah, it's such a bummer when you like the role too, you know. And I've been I hear people doing this all. I love my job, but I can't. The culture, it's, you know, it doesn't nurture my humanness.
That same thing is like, I love the job, but, and there's always a but, you know, it's always that but, but it's one, so these sort of services. And I'm a big advocate for mental health. Like I started my journey about 1.5 years ago, and after 30 years, my whole life not going through it and not understanding things about myself and why I do things. Once I started that journey, and I look back, I'm like, why didn't I start it sooner? But you know, everyone has to do it at their own pace. Everyone has to do it at their own, because sometimes it's not for everyone, you know. But you know, these sort of things are great for the soul, and you know, and you can walk through life with weight on your back, or you can cruise through it with your head held high, you know. So
I remember when I started my and, you know, full disclosure, I'm a work in the sector like most people, because I struggled from mental health issues. I remember when I got my first diagnosis like years ago, I was like, this is a wank. Like, it's just, what is this? Like, you know, integrating my feelings and pausing to acknowledge myself. I didn't even have a relationship with myself. Because our culture just doesn't really have. Australia and New Zealand are really good at being cool. Just be cool, be chill. That's what we do. That's cool. And you know, emotions aren't cool yet, but
you know, like,
you'll be right. Exactly. We're getting there though. I feel like being in emotional feelings, the kind of person's slowly becoming cool, depending on how you rock it. But it's a weird journey. It's a weird journey. But I'm glad I did it. You know, I'm really glad. I mean, my physical health improved so much. I mean, I lost like heaps of weight. All these, like, I had back pain from here down to here for 10 years. And it was crazy once all that, because the feelings that store in your body, they're there forever, right? So talk therapy is not for everyone, but there are so many different forms of therapy as well that can help you to understand and build the relationship with yourself. Then it's just working out how to do this at an organizational level. Ensure that your business is still making cash.
Absolutely.
So let's jump into more on that subject. Let's jump into more practical tips for people as they're supporting their staff. And I will try and get Zoom to share my screen again. Can we see the white screen? Awesome. All right. So this next bit is a little bit nitty gritty. If anyone is feeling affected by this, please feel free to jump out. Don't feel that you have to stay here. So I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we will be talking about navigating suicide or suicidal ideation with a staff member over the next 10 minutes or so. And just want to acknowledge that some people sitting here taking the time out to be a part of this will have faced this themselves. So will have thought about suicide or ideated about, you know, potentially, you know, just saying no to this whole crazy universe that we live in. And I just want to thank you and honor you for being here as well. And I think it's a really powerful thing too, if you've experienced suicidal ideation. It's a powerful thing to have that experience and then kind of go forth and be able to hold others in that space. So thank you. And, you know, we're super glad that you are still here and with us today. But we're just going to go through some step-by-steps. And again, we will send this PDF tomorrow. So this is a really great little slide to refer back to. If you have any questions about this, please email me. Prior to working at Music Vic, I worked in crisis support. So organizations like Sane Australia, Men's Line, Reach Out, which is a youth service. So a lot of experience in the space. And before that at 000. So that was probably an even deeper dive into it. But the first thing you want to do if you're concerned that a staff member is suicidal or thinking, about self-harm that's quite severe. And it's probably a good time to acknowledge as well that self-harm and suicide are different things. Self-harm is a coping mechanism for many people, and there's many different forms of self-harm, and I'm not going to go through the methodology here today, but if you think from a kind of practitioner's lens, what we do is harm minimization. So something that's probably not, I can't say nothing's triggering, but if you think about alcohol and drug use as a form of self-harm, when you go to a clinic to get support for that, like a Turning Point or an Eastern Health, they're not going to say to you, we'll just stop now. They're going to try and reduce your use, basically, or ensure you're doing it safely while they support you with whatever's under that. I always think of, if you're going to go to the dentist for a root canal, they're not going to give you a filling. They might give you something, though, to tie you over, and then they'll get to the root cause when they can. You sort of the same thing. You chip away. You don't want to just get rid of all the coping mechanisms like that. So there is a difference between self-harm and suicidal ideation. I just want to flag that your job is not to manage whether or not someone's going to self-harm, but you do want to determine, and it's a civil responsibility for all of us, that if we know someone's going to end their life, that we feel comfortable to act on that. We feel like we know what we need to do next. So firstly, ensure that you're listening and holding that space. So you don't have to say anything, just, yep, I'm here for you. You can talk to me. But the first thing you want to do, and this is a very challenging dichotomy for mental health counsellors, is iterate confidentiality, but also its limits. And this can be really hard to say to someone, everything stays between you and me, except in the instance that I'm concerned that you're at imminent risk, as in today or soon, of harming yourself to the degree that you're not with us anymore, or harming someone else. So if someone's saying to you, I'm going to go to the park later and do it, or they're saying to you that they're going to harm their kid later, these are civil responsibilities that we all have. And that's really challenging. It's hard. It's hard in a clinician's capacity too, to say, I'm here to listen. However, if there's imminent risk of you harming yourself or someone else, I have to ensure you get support. And that's always how I like to frame it. So I'll need to ensure you get support. That's 000. That's who that is. And the police then will often, from my experience of doing many, many risk escalations, police will usually call first as well. Not always, it depends on the information they're given. But if, it's a third party check-in and you're saying, look, my staff members said that they've had enough, they're giving up tonight, they'll probably give them a ring before they do anything. It really depends. It's all contextual, but please know that the police, I know there's a lot of, they don't always handle everything well, but it is their job to triage that event. You shouldn't feel that you have to sit in that space alone ever. No one should feel that they have to bear witness to suicide or that they have to hold that space alone. Not even clinicians. Even we would get support in that setting. The other thing you can do, and this is probably the more common presentation, is for me, and again, a bit of self-disclosure, I used to be incredibly suicidal for a long period of time. You'll get ambivalent disclosure. So I just feel like giving up. And you'll start asking the questions, do you feel like you're going to hurt yourself today? I don't know, and it's just, I don't know, that real ambivalence. Give Lifeline a call.
Yeah.
Give Suicide Callback Service a call. Ask them for their professional opinion, and they will step you through. They'll walk you through the next steps. You are never, ever alone. This is one of the reasons these organizations are 24/7 too. They want to ensure that no person in the community feels alone supporting someone in this space,
Yeah.
It can be very traumatizing. Sorry, go Kiwat.
No, I was just going to say, I've called Lifeline before.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a very low place earlier this year, and I was in a dark place. My dad is trained in suicide prevention, and he was there for me and talked me off the ledge, so to speak. And then he mentioned to me when I was sort of like coming back from visiting him on this road trip, and he said to me, "It's like you're gonna relapse. It'll happen again." And he's like, "When it happens, I want you to lean on these sort of systems and lean on something." And and I was feeling very alone. I didn't feel like I had anyone I could talk to or call. It was late, and I called Lifeline, and they were very genuine and soft. And I knew that I didn't want to go into everything, but I just knew I needed to talk to somebody. And my sleeping patterns were off, so it was just a very vulnerable time you know, sometimes I'm like, I'm like, I don't know, if you're a creative, you might be up at 2, 3 in the morning, something like that. And it was just a lonely time for me. And yeah, and I felt myself. I listened to my dad's voice in my head and I was like, okay. And then I literally Googled and I just called the number straight up, and yeah, and they really helped me. So yeah, it's yeah, having it 24/7 is really good. And it's, yeah, and I didn't have to go into too much detail, you know, and it was just understanding, you know, and that's what it felt like. It was just understanding that someone was there, you know, and I didn't feel alone, and it really helped me get back off the ledge.
Thanks for sharing, brother. And it sounds like it was a really lovely call as well, you know, that you had someone that held space for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I tell you as well, if you ever ring Lifeline or suicide callback service or suicide line in Victoria and you feel that the counsellor is not, no, this, I don't feel comfortable with this, hang up, go again. You will get another counsellor. And, you know, I'm not here to preach that our sector is perfect. It's not, you know, we don't have in any sector amazing clinicians on every helpline, but their job is to support you in this space. And I have heard of this happening. I've heard of people getting a crap counsellor, feeling disempowered and having to navigate it on their own. You know, please ring again, because you'll find there's amazing professionals on these helplines. There's always one tosser, and someone's got to land the tosser, and you don't want to land a tosser when you're in.
It's always one.
Always. And when you're in this space, it's the last thing you need. It's really challenging too. And thank you, Kiwat, for sharing. If the person you're supporting is distressed, it's hard not to heighten with them. It's really hard. It's hard not to go into that space. Like, what do I do? Fuck. That's what this is here for. So please know that just the first thing you do, just listen. It's okay to directly ask, are you thinking of taking your life? Are you thinking of hurting yourself? Trust me, you're not implanting that. There was an old school mentality that if you said that, you're implanting the idea. That's not it at all. And in fact, there is no data to support that. Beyond Blue is a big advocate for this as well. It's okay to ask directly. You need to determine the safety of your employee. And then, as Kiwat just said, exactly what his dad did, I think that you really need to talk to a trained professional right now. Are you able to give Lifeline a call for me? Like, just give them a call tonight. Give them a call today. If that person says, yeah, I'll get in touch with them, I'll do it. I don't want to, but I'll do it. Brilliant. You know, you've essentially de-escalated risk, or they've de-escalated it with you or themselves. So if you feel like they're not listening, they're checked out, you're confident, you know, they've told you, yeah, 100% ring 000. Don't sit in that space. And as someone, I'm lucky because I've worked there and I've received a lot of calls there in this realm. And, you know, that's their job. They're here to triage that event and make sure that person's okay. And that's, you know, that's what we're all meant to do, you know, as people living in this country. If we know a child's going to be harmed or someone's going to be at risk of their lives potentially ending, we need to act on that. That's what we need to do as adults. But the big one is this can be incredibly traumatic. There's a very real phenomena called vicarious trauma, which is essentially trauma that you inherit from someone else. And compassion fatigue is also tied closely to that as well. So make sure, even if you feel fine, I'm all good, that was sweet, I was equipped to deal with that, make sure that you reach out to me for a debrief or a helpline of your choosing, or your own counsellor. It doesn't matter who, but try and touch base with a professional if you can, you know, because you'd be surprised what can sit with you for quite some time before it re-emerges. You know, our brains are pretty incredible like that. Kiwat, anything else on this one?
No, other than sort of just lean on those sort of support systems, whether they, you know, whether they are Lifeline or whether it is, you know, your own sort of, you've got those people that you trust that you can lean on.
Yeah.
You know, that's one thing that I've valued, is that, you know, as things change, you'll have those people, those lifelong friends that, you know, you trust, and their support systems. And I lean on them when I'm struggling through something, and they really get me through. And then if it ever gets to a point where, you know, they can't help you, and like you were saying, you know, I need you to seek professional support, listen to that, because, you know, they will help you where they can, but when they can't, that's why there's these systems in place, these other ones. So yeah, Kath has a question.
It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
a comment. Like, I know some people who I've been trying to get, like musicians, trying to get some help for, and trying to get them to call up and get some help, but they are that scared of being diagnosed and, locked up in the loony bin, that
Mm,
they're just not, not willing. Like, the anxiety is that crippling, they're not willing to make those calls.
mhm.
And yeah, it's been falling
That's
on deaf ear
hard.
a lot.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh,
What do you
yeah.
recommend?
That's really on the system, Kath.
Mm.
And that's what we've done. Unfortunately, in Australia, we have done that to people for a very long time. And now that's the narrative that's still in our society. I mean, kudos to you and credit to you for holding the space in the interim. But just feel free to tell them from myself directly that that's just not how the system works now. And we're really trying to strip back
Mm.
the system doing that to human beings. And,
Yeah.
The pathology in mental health is really challenging. And I think it's important that people understand the support available to them. It's very different seeing a psychiatrist to a psychologist, counselor, or social worker, right? So you got to remember, and this is so confusing, and this is probably where a lot of their fear stems from. We've always had psychiatrists in this country. That's who treated our mental health. We always had doctors that specialized in mental health that gave you pills or wrote a form to put you, into, as you said, the loony bin, the asylum out in Kew or whatever it was back in the day. But there's, again, people like Carl Rogers and people that diverted off and said, actually, we're all just a culmination of our experiences in life, and we don't necessarily need to be locked up or put in loony bins. And in fact, that's mostly not therapeutic for anyone. So I think maybe if you could remind them that it's not just it's not how we work anymore, but also they don't just have to see a psychiatrist. They don't have to start there. They could start with, I highly recommend looking on ACA, PACFA, APS, these websites, and looking at a practitioner that resonates with you. Like, what do you care about? Because they might say, oh, I do trauma-informed work, or I do somatic therapy. And there's so many different practitioners out there. But that's a very understandable and real fear, because we've only gotten rid of that system not too many years ago now. Like, we're talking the last 20 years.
And it's definitely changed. Like I've for myself, like I speak to my psych on the phone. We've been talking for a year and a half, and I've never met the guy face to face, and that works for me because I read body languages, and and I would get self-conscious if I saw him face to face. So phone really works for me. There's many different sources, and you're talking about artists as well. Like I was worried that when I started, I would lose my creative flow. I would lose my creative identity because I write from, I can write from dark places, but I don't always want to write like that. And I thought I would lose that. And that was a very real worry for me. And I spoke about that with my psych and worked through that. And really, really found somebody that connected with me and remembered my stories every time we talk, always remembering something. And that's just something from my experiences, as an artist myself, trying to navigate it. And that was a very real worry. But there are different ways to
it's
go
scary.
about it.
It is. And the other thing, Kath, is if they're really, really adamant, not doing it, not going, I don't want my name anywhere. Organizations like Sane Australia, where you can have a 30-minute chat with and I've worked with these guys. They're amazing. They're amazing counselors. They can't do anything anyway. So they could have a number on hand to do a risk assessment. That's it. That's the most they could do. The most they could do is for a cop to give the person a ring and check that they're okay. But so that's another option. And they have so much insight into the history of that specific issue as well. So they may be able to ease some of that anxiety. But good on you for sitting in that space, and thanks for raising that too. That's a brilliant flag. Of course, yeah. All right, guys, this is just as we're wrapping up, because I want to make sure we do a little tiny breathing exercise at the end, because we have ingested a stack of information. You've been awesome. It means the world if anyone has a phone if they could take a picture of this QR code, a form will come up. Thanks, brother. Appreciate that. A form will come up. It's a whole of 10 to 20 seconds. If you want to do it after our grounding exercise, that's fine. There it is. Now, this is really important for us because we're funded by the state government. Thank you, state government. However, we do need to show them that we're doing the work and that people are enjoying the content. So we'd love to get funded past June next year. And your feedback's really helpful. Even if it's average feedback, it's still helpful because it shows them people are attending the webinars. So go for gold. It's anonymous. I don't see who submits them. Thank you if you are doing that. And then I'm going to go to the next very important slide as I am officially going over. Alrighty. So at the end of this, again, we'll send these PDFs around tomorrow, but here's a few services you can use. Standby support after suicide are really amazing 24/7 service as well. They'll pretty much support anyone affected by any kind of suicide challenges, even if it's not after the fact. Lifeline are amazing. Heads Up, again, mentioned them a few times, specifically with training and resources that can help you develop policies to implement into your work environment as well. And my details are there too. If you want to connect in and have a chat or do some regular sessions with me, you are most welcome to do that. And let's do a little wee grounding exercise. Quickly.
I love this.
Yeah, let's do one. Let's do one. Let's see what we can whip out in time.
We did the last one last session, and I like came out of the meeting room and I was like, I'm so chill. It was great.
That one was quite long, eh? I was like, oh, I think I'll log off now.
It was great. I was like, I want to go have a nap. Like
this one will be not too long, but enough to kind of just let's sort of sit with ourselves after that, because there was a lot. So if we sit quietly, and for those of you that don't want to hang around, that's more than fine. Feel free to log off. Kiwat and I, at least, and anyone else, if we sit quietly with both feet on the ground and hands in our lap if we want. Some people like to put a hand on the heart, 2 hands on the heart. Another really beautiful one is the self-hold. So you get your left hand, put it under your right armpit, your right hand on your left shoulder, and just give yourself a hug. Just hold yourself. Whew. Don't do that a lot to ourselves as adults, but very comforting. You may like to close your eyes if you feel safe to do so. Or you may want to keep your eyes open. You can focus your attention on something in the room. Just gently gaze. So we start to notice the breath as it enters your body through your nose, travels to your lungs, and noticing as you exhale to how the breath leaves your body through your mouth. You don't have to try to do anything with your breathing. Just simply notice it. So pay attention to it. And just be aware of it. And it doesn't matter how fast or slow you're breathing, just tuning into the rhythm. Allow your body to do what it does naturally. So breathe in relaxation and breathing out the tension. It's funny that as we breathe out, it's sort of a hot energy. We breathe in, it's nice and cool. Be aware of the physical sensations of breathing in and breathing out. And if you find that thoughts are intruding, which by now they most definitely will be, just noticing those thoughts. allow those thoughts to be as they are. Gently bring your awareness back to this beautiful breath. Now, with one last breath, bring your attention and awareness back to the present, ready to continue your day with awareness, a little bit of relaxation, and hopefully a bit of focus as well. Thank you, Mary. Thanks for coming all the way from the States. Thanks, Kath. Fiona's gone. Thanks, everyone else, for coming. And feel free to sit in the space a little bit longer. It's a very hard space to come out of. But thank you, everyone, for coming in. I really appreciate it. And we'll send the resources tomorrow.
Thank you.
Cheers,
And,
Judy.
we'll be back in the new year with some more workshops, and we'll be sending that out. And I think also we'll have it in our Music Lovers newsletter, the new one. So sign up to that and get the notifications. And thank you, everyone.
Cheers, Tam.
Thanks, Tam. Thanks, Kath.
Thanks, team. Have a lovely Thursday.
Yes, and happy holidays.
Happy New Year.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Too easy.